I wanted to thank everybody for attending our fourth Applied U webinar sponsored by Bentley University and the Association for Applied and Clinical Sociology. My name is Gary David. I'm an immediate past president of the AACS. I'm also a professor at Bentley University, and I have my own consultancy called Ethnoanalytics. And I was one of the people who started the Applied U webinar with the main goal being providing professional development and educational opportunities for our members and anybody who's interested in the topics that we're covering. We're fortunate today for this month's installment to have Dr. Jonathan White, who is from Bentley University and is also the U.S. chair of the We movement. And he'll be talking about social entrepreneurship. And this was based off of his professional development workshop, which he held at the 2018 AACS annual meeting in Norfolk, Virginia. A few housekeeping items before we begin. If you have any questions, please provide them in the chat box located in the Zoom screen. You should be able to find that at the bottom bar of your Zoom screen. You can ask questions anytime you like. Dr. White might answer them or we might hold off to the end of the webinar until we get to those. And we are recording the webinar, and a copy of it will be uploaded to the AACS Applied U YouTube site, which you can find if you Google in YouTube Applied U. I will also send out an announcement and a link once it is up. You can find past webinars there as well. And I also would like to mention that our next webinar will be next month. We're working out the date still. And it will be with Dr. Bob Moore of IBM, who just published a book on using conversation analysis as a way of designing better conversational voice agents. So that'd be very interesting as well. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Dr. White. Jonathan, take it away.
Well, awesome. Thanks so much, Gary. Just a quick note to you that I am not seeing the chat box with my screen maximized on the PowerPoint. So if you think at any time it would be good to take some questions, I'll follow your cue, if that's okay with you. Anyhow, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining. I'm really looking forward to this. Thank you to Gary and to AACS for the opportunity as well. I am a professor here of sociology at Bentley University. I also am the director of the Bentley Service Learning and Civic Engagement Center, which is one of the first service learning programs in the country and one of the largest. We send about 1,000 students out into the community each year to about 50 community partner sites, all through about 100 faculty members on campus. So it's all service learning that takes place through coursework. We don't do community service on our campus. It's intentional service learning components. Pretty cool to be involved with. I'm also involved in many boards of directors for nonprofits, some of which are social enterprises or have social enterprise components to them. And am currently chair of the U.S. Board of Directors for the We movement, which is an amazing organization that has about 3.8 million youth involved worldwide, and has done an incredible job of internationally of bringing sustainable international development models, and domestically kind of penetrating curriculum in the U.S. and Canada with global citizenship curriculum, and empowering young people through our We Schools program to gain the tool set that they need in order to create the change that they would like to change. I also finally, as with Gary, do a fair amount of consultancy for myself mostly with nonprofits, a lot of organizational consultancies, and particularly on strategic planning, as well as with social enterprises. So I'll bring some of that in as well. So here we go. Looking forward to our conversation today. If I can get this to click. There we go. So starting with, what is a social entrepreneur? I think it's an important conversation to start with, not only so that we define it, but also so that we can come to a collective understanding that there are many different definitions that are floating around. And in my opinion, that some of these now are co-opted definitions that stray away, and some even quite far away from the original intentions of social enterprise, and actually co-opted in a way that I think can be quite harmful to the overall movement and where it's trying to drive, because where social entrepreneurship is trying to drive is really quite exciting. Involves true structural social change, involves taking a look at all of the things that we sociologists find most important: structural change, power structures, social movements, and real ability to kind of rethink our thinking on business and corporate models, which is something that probably most of us on this call agree is quite necessary. So when social entrepreneurship was originally founded and conceived of, it was really about taking a look at how you can create a business for profit, but equally for people and planet. So not an add-in at the end, not something to integrate or to give back on the back end, but literally, how do you create a business that's for the social good and make profit off of it? And it's been, as I said, kind of watered down by different folks in different places. Everybody has their own definition. You can see from this slide, it's actually not a surprise that there's different definitions, in that entrepreneurs themselves would have collaborative approaches and would allow for people to create their own definitions. But there was a business school that's running a social entrepreneurship program. I won't mention which one, but they start in their social entrepreneurship program by saying business has the solutions to the world's biggest problems. That's their mission statement for their social entrepreneurship program. And that's not really what it's supposed to be about. So there's been a fair amount of drift. And you can see that the Ashoka Foundation, that we'll talk about later, talks about social entrepreneurs as individuals with innovative solutions to society's most pressing social problems. And on this page, I like that PBS definition the most. Act as the change agents for society, seizing opportunities others miss in order to improve systems, invent and disseminate new approaches, and advance sustainable solutions that create social value. My definition, and what I'd probably most like us to be looking through today, or at least that I'll be taking us through, is here. This is from an interview I did a few years back. While a business entrepreneur looks for a hole in the market and creates a product or company to fill that hole, a social entrepreneur looks for a hole in the world, a social problem needing change, and then creates a product or business to fill that hole. While a business entrepreneur measures success in profit and return, a social entrepreneur measures it in social capital. So the difference is that both a business entrepreneur and a social entrepreneur, who, make no mistake about it, are business people, they both are looking for a hole in the market. At the same time, the social entrepreneur, the hole that they're looking for is a hole in the world. So it could be a social entrepreneur may find that there's a product that they're really interested in consuming for themselves, and yet they find that when they go to the grocery store or when they go to the shopping store, that there's no product that they feel good buying because it's not ethical for them. They lie inside this larger conscious consumption movement that many of us on this call are probably a part of, and they see that there's no product. So they know that there's others like them who are conscious consumers. They know that this is actually a really growing market, and they're entrepreneurs. So they see that hole in the market on a particular product that already exists, and they create a alternative that's good for people and planet. And from that, they rely on us as conscious consumers to buy the product, and they make their profit off of it. So you'll notice it starts with the social good first. Or a social entrepreneur doesn't take a look at current product, but they take a look at what needs to change in the world. They take a look at the big pressing social problems of the world, and they create business models to help to plug into that. So for instance, much of the green technology businesses would fit into that category. So I like this definition, taking a look at a hole in the world and then filling that hole, and in the process, and intentionally so, making profit from it. So many of us are familiar with the concept of people, profit, planet, or what's called the triple bottom line. And I really like the model of people, profit, planet. Look, people are struggling. People are suffering around the world. There's over 1 billion people without electricity, and 1.5 billion people who don't have clean water and sanitation. And we know that kids around the world aren't able to access education, basic education, even primary education, let alone beyond, in large numbers around the world, although the Sustainable Development Goals are working toward this. And organizations like which I had mentioned that I'm on the board of, but there's so much need out there. And in our country, in the US, where you're still looking at between 3 and 5 million homeless individuals during the course of the year, 4 to 500,000 on any given night. And when you're looking at over 50 million people who are hungry in the US by US first world standards, out of a population of 320 some odd million, that's pretty remarkable that 1 out of 7 Americans and 40% of those being children are hungry. So we know that there's a lot of suffering on this planet, and I really was digging into poverty there. I mean, there's domestic violence, there's the Me Too movement, there's Black Lives Matters and racism, there's that LGBTQ and all of the social problems that are developing around it. There's immigration. We are in no shortage, unfortunately, as sociologists and as social entrepreneurs, of issues to identify, social problems to identify that are affecting people. We also know that the planet is in peril. I think most of us know that, although we unfortunately in the US are under an administration that's just emphatically denying that, although in my mind they know better, but they're taking this third pillar of profit, and it matters to them much more than people or planet do, and so they deny the need for social safety net and for programs to move people forward, and they deny the existence of those factors which are threatening the very planet upon which we all depend, and that is frightening. So the planet's in peril, and what do you do about that in a world where standard of living matters, in a world where when you're looking up at that people bubble, where really all of us who are humanitarians want to be able to move the world's poorest up, be able to look at poorer folks in the US and move them up, and yet not destroy the planet. And I think the last stat I saw on this is that if we brought everybody up to a standard of US living, it would take the current US standard of living, it would take 6 planets to be able to support that. So it's not even a realizable goal. Yet we live in a world where we like our stuff, we like to consume, and so this balance is really difficult. People, profit, planet. So social entrepreneurs take a look at that, and I think when you look at this triple bottom line, it's not always social entrepreneurs who are leading the way on that. So you'll have a lot of entrepreneurs who take a look at profit and then figure out how to help people and planet. And what defines a social entrepreneur and a social enterprise is that it starts with people and planet, and then from there, and the issues that the social problems, the social issues, and then from there finds a way and creates business models to create profit off of solving the issues that are affecting people and planet. And you may have heard of the quadruple bottom line as well, which adds in this idea of purpose. As sociologists, of course, we're not only concerned with the world's great social problems, both for people and planet, but also the meaning of work, the meaning of our lives, the way that we come to be happy. It was interesting, I'm sure many of you on the call are aware, as has been happening for quite some time on a recent World Happiness Survey that came out a few months back. Once again, the U.S. Americans themselves rank themselves as in self ratings, rank themselves as the least happy of all people living in similar democratic countries, rank themselves as the least happy of all people living in capitalist countries. And part of that is purpose. Living our lives, our work lives, which dominate our lives in not only pursuit of profit in our own consumptive lifestyles and the consumptive and material well-being of the larger nation, but also doing good while doing this, doing good while doing well. And the new generation, from the millennials into Generation Z right now, they're actually demanding this. There was a really cool study. There's been a bunch of these studies, but a very large study that came out recently that shows that actually millennials are spending almost as much time. It's something like 25 minutes out of each hour. When they go off to job interviews, they're spending as much time interviewing the companies as the companies are interviewing them. So the company may have about 35 minutes out of that hour to interview the potential employee, but actually Generation Z is interviewing the company. And what they're interviewing them about, some of the normal questions that you would ask, how much am I going to get paid? What's my retirement plan, my benefits, all of which are important, but also what kind of company are you? Are you doing good? What's your civic involvement? How can I as an employee be involved and give back? Are you evolving? Are you more than just considering ways to make money and give back? Are you considering how to evolve your very business practices in a way that makes the damage you're doing as you seek profit less, and ultimately even works to eliminate that? And that's what these studies are showing that Generation Z is actually asking for. And without knowing it, or without all of them knowing it, in a sense, what that Generation Z has is a social entrepreneurial spirit. They want to have good jobs. They want to think about their futures and their American dreams and whatnot. At the same time, they want to ensure that their lives have great purpose. So that's part of the social entrepreneurship movement. What isn't social entrepreneurship? It isn't business ethics. Business ethics are good, and they're important, of course. That's a movement that started, 50 plus years ago. And actually, Bentley has a pretty strong history in that. Some of the early research and studies in that movement came from here, and we still have a Center for Business Ethics. It's very important that every business has a code of ethics, of course. The reason that we're past that, in a sense, is because it's just become, and to great credit to those in the early part of that movement, it's really become part of the paradigm. Businesses have to have ethical standards, some of which are regulated, more of which should be, in my opinion, but companies themselves self-regulate on this much more than they used to. And we know that there are ethical violations constantly from businesses, some of which are caught, many of which aren't, some of which are actually considered legal. But business ethics is important to continue moving forward, but we're in the social entrepreneurship movement, we're beyond that. Next kind of came this idea of having community giving and nonprofit arms inside companies. So we've got our code of ethics. We're working pretty well inside of that. And now employees and consumers started demanding more. We want you to give back some of your profits. So many, and even most big businesses and even small businesses actually have arms, whether it's a department inside their company that's a community giving department or a community relations department, or whether they've even created a nonprofit foundation by the same name, so Corporation X, and then Corporation X nonprofit. And what those are set up to do is to take some of the profits and to find ways to give it back. More recently, a reasonably new movement, corporate social responsibility, last 15 or so years. It was started before that, but it's really become strong. And this is the idea of actually taking a look at inside the very ethos of companies and finding ways for them to be socially responsible. So it includes things like giving back, nonprofit arms, community giving, but it also does include kind of taking a look at like a swab of what's already taking place in the company. Can we make our practices greener inside what we do? Can we make our labor practices better inside what we do? Can we offer better health and other benefits to our current employees inside of what we already do? And you'll notice that at the end of each sentence, when I was speaking about corporate social responsibility, that I have that parenthetical inside of what we already do. So I kind of liken corporate social responsibility, which I believe in and I think is important inside companies that exist and that probably aren't going to immediately shift from where they are to where I think we would all like to see them be. I see it as a step in between, but it's kind of like sticking a knife 10 inches into somebody and then pulling it out 3 inches and calling that responsibility. And I think that that's where it has been diluted to a lot of times. And so companies get a lot of credit for being socially responsible companies, which they are on the back end, but on the front end, they're doing a lot of damage. Investing in markets where there's no human rights, or even intentionally profiting off of no human rights, investing in schemes and in ways that may and will be harmful to the environment. And again, many times even advocating overseas for environmental deregulation so that they can increase their bottom line. And therefore their profit, and then on the back end, doing these socially responsible pieces. So it's a move. It's better than it's further along than business ethics. It's further along than community giving, but it's not all the way there. One last question to explore before we move into some more on social enterprises, but it's really important because it's been co-opted. This is why I'm spending so much time. It's really important to understand where it's evolving from, what it's not, and in order for us to understand what it is so that we can drive the social entrepreneurial movement in the right directions, because it has this incredible power to it. If it's done right, the social enterprise movement could be exceptionally effective at getting at many of our goals as sociologists, looking at structural issues, power issues, creating a social movement that creates true and real and sustainable social change. So nonprofits are not social enterprises. They have all of the elements of social enterprise. They have those leaders who see a hole in the world and have an innovative spirit to overcome any obstacle to figure out how to plug into it. And they have business plans behind them. And they care at core, or they should care at core about people and planet. That's their mission. The difference is that nonprofits don't have that last element that social enterprises do, which is creating and seeking profit. So nonprofits aren't technically social enterprises, but what we're looking at when we look at social enterprises is how to take the values of nonprofits, finding a hole in the world, creating an organization through business planning and all the things that are needed to fill that hole, with the difference being at the end, creating profit from it. So that's where that lies. Many of you are familiar with some of the bigger examples of social enterprise. Anita Roddick was in on the very ground movement in the social enterprise sector. She's since passed away kind of young and kind of tragically, but you can see that her thing was she wanted to have makeup and lines of beauty care. And she really felt uncomfortable with all of the products that were on the market. It started with her discomfort with the fact that these products were all animal tested, and that went against her principles, particularly because the animals were getting harmed. And then as she started to research how to create a line of beauty products that weren't animal tested, she realized how much damage the planet was taking. Just to provide products that really are, in economic and in sociological terms, we would call them excess products. We don't need makeup and beauty products. We may need it inside a cultural context to some extent or other, but we don't actually need them for our survival. So they're excess products, not subsistence products. And here they are hurting animals, and here they are hurting the planet. And not only that, so often under horrible labor standards. So she started to create a company, which we all know became super successful. And I did a screenshot with a pull-down menu off of their front page. This is just from the last couple of days. And you can see just on their pull-down menu, we're 100% vegetarian. We're forever against animal testing. You can see that their mission is to enrich, not exploit. Empowering women in modern day slavery, and etc. So this isn't about giving back. That's actually about their core values. That's their core mission, and it's integrated literally in every conversation they have when they talk about growth, profit growth, and company growth. This is what they talk about. Ben & Jerry's is another one of the bigger examples of this. Those two gentlemen, Ben and Jerry, they were at school in university in Vermont, and they actually were struggling to find an ice cream that they felt comfortable purchasing and eating based on what they were learning in our classrooms. Those of us who were professors on the call, they were learning about planetary destruction, and they were learning about labor. And they would go to the grocery store, and they literally just couldn't find an ice cream that they ethically felt comfortable with. And, they wanted ice cream. Who doesn't want ice cream? So they took an early leap. Today, there's a quite large conscious consumption movement, but they took an early leap that if they were struggling and they were willing to pay more, that there would be other people. And that's where they are now, which is really pretty cool. And so they have a triple bottom line approach, as you can see from the three icons there. They also, this is right on their front page, so they go beyond just ensuring that their product, literally from start to finish, is socially thoughtful and innovative. Actually, if you go to Vermont to their main headquarters, they have several buildings. One of their biggest buildings is actually an entire building dedicated to fair trade and to helping the national fair trade movement, which I'll talk about in a minute. But this is on their front page. So in addition to selling their ice cream on the front page, they have 10 racial justice organizations you support. This is just, right now. Criminal justice reform, food system change, beginning with breakthrough leaders. So it's core to their principles. These are the issues that they care about at the moment. And you can see down below how they make their ice cream in the best possible way. So these businesses are transparent. They're also monitored. So, for instance, the Body Shop has all kinds of organic certifications. Some of their products have fair trade certification. Ben & Jerry's is the first ever all fair trade ice cream product. Their entire line is completely fair trade. I remember, because I've done some consulting with them, and I remember in the early days when they were asking if it was possible, I remember talking about gravity and saying, it's possible to get toward fair trade and to make some of your ice cream flavors fair trade, but right now, some of the ingredients that you would put into your ice cream, there's not even a fair trade option for them. And so what they did, instead of hearing about gravity, is they decided to change gravity. So they went to the Fair Trade Federation and Fair Trade USA and actually worked with them on each product that they needed, each ingredient that they needed for their different ice creams until there was a viable alternative. So they've gone above and beyond. And they're a huge player in the anti-GMO movement and the GMO labeling movement, as is, by the way, Stonyfield's yogurt. Actually, the original founder of that, he spends his entire office day working on GMO advocacy at this point. That's how deeply the people who start social enterprises believe in the value of their ideas. Whole Foods Market, which may be more controversial for many reasons, they haven't hit it as well, but they've been essential in moving many things that I'll talk about in a second. And of course, now they've sold to Amazon. So far, sticking to their values under Amazon, and yet we can argue in a diffusion of responsibility conversation, it's still Amazon, which has horrible values. But this is Whole Foods. And I remember growing up, and many of you probably do too, that I was always told that this idea of the organic movement was only going to be for the wealthy and elite, which it is still, but the prices have come way down, and supermarkets are starting to get more and more organic. And you can see the possibility of a future where agriculture is organic, and what we buy in our supermarket is organic, and the price point has been brought down, and that's based on consumer demand. The more of us who buy it at this still very high price, the more that the price will come down, supply and demand. And you can see their core values, which are really lovingly and lovely done, are really interesting, and they really kind of show these ideas of social entrepreneurship. Another one that you may or may not have heard of, I know some on the call have, because we're lucky enough to have some people from the We movement, which has a sister or partner organization called Me to We. This one is one of my favorite examples, not just because I'm involved in it, because it's one of everybody's favorite examples in the social enterprise movement. So there's an organization called We Charity that I told you about up front, the organization I'm on the board of directors for. And as we were moving forward in our evolution 20 some odd years ago, we realized that people don't like to donate money to nonprofits that will go to administration. Which is unfair, by the way, because it's an organization, it's a business. All of us should look at 12 to 15 cents as very fair. For any dollar we give, 12 to 15 cents to come off towards admin. I actually wouldn't donate to a decent sized charity that didn't take money off for admin, because how are they running it? Are they efficient? Are they treating their employees well? Are they staffed well enough to be on top of it so that they're getting the most bang for the buck out of my dollar? Smaller nonprofits can sometimes operate on less admin, of course. But I think that a second piece that we struggled with early on in the We movement was that most of our donors at the time, I think over 75% of the money that we were taking in at the time, was coming from young people underneath the age of 18. And we made a promise to them that 100 cents on the dollar, since they literally were raising the money in penny drives and whatnot, 100 cents on the dollar would go to the projects that they were putting it toward. So we needed to create a way to bring down our own administration costs. And we created an organization called Me to We, which is a social enterprise, literally through and through. It's about people and planet, but it's there to make profit. And then for us, that profit then gets donated back over to the charitable side. So in Me to We's mission, actually, it's in the mission that a minimum of 50% of end of year profit will be put back over to the charitable side, We Charity, and that other 50%, there's no stakeholders seeking profit, seeking investment profit off of it. The other 50% will be put back in to keep growing Me to We, the social enterprises, so that we can gain more and more money towards admin. Meanwhile, we just did a self-study, and over the last 5 years, actually, Me to We has given almost 90% of its profits over to We Charity over the last 5 years. That's allowed the nonprofit side to grow. It's allowed us to seek young donors and be able to promise them 100 cents on the dollar. And it's been more than enough to bring our overall administration costs for the organization to somewhere in the 9%, a little lower than 9% rate last year, which is pretty phenomenal, actually. Considering the size of the operations. And so Me to We is a series of social enterprises in a sense. So we have Fair Trade Chocolate, Me to We Chocolate. We have Me to We Coffee. We run immersion trips that are as far away from poverty tourism as possible. These are trips where, such as we would lead with our students from universities, and really take a look at how charity and sustainable international development work, have an opportunity to meet people where they live, to help and pitch in and partner with those communities, and then to come back and have it educate ourselves about how we want to live our lives. and Me2We also has women's micro development empowerment projects. So whichever country it's in, the women largely, and sometimes the men, create product that we then sell on the U.S. market. Again, with all of the proceeds of that going back into their individual communities. So it's a really interesting model that's talked about a lot on the aggregate national and international social entrepreneurship movement, because it's a social enterprise created to support a charity. One last thing I wanted to point out, there's so much I could literally could have done slide after slide. I think the movement's so exciting. I showed you some of the biggies, the Ben and Jerry's and Whole Foods of the world, but it's incredible how many small social enterprises are popping up. And I think with this Generation Z and it being such an incredible concern of theirs, and their willingness to take a risk on some levels, I think we're going to see more and more popping up. But Done Good is a really interesting app. I called it the Social Entrepreneur. So you can actually download the app, Done Good, and every time you go to purchase a product, so if you wanted to purchase books from Amazon, what would happen on your screen, a Done Good would pop up, and it would give you alternatives that are pre-screened social enterprises where you can buy that same book without buying it from Amazon, or where you can buy that sweater you want to buy, but know that it's been good for people, planet, and profit by just redirecting you to another website, which is awfully good. So their mission is to make it quick, easy, and affordable to use our purchasing power for good. And these are the values by which they judge that. It's still growing. I can't remember how many companies they have involved at this point, but so most of the time, if I go to make a product purchase, something else will pop up, even though I'm pretty aware of shopping responsibly. Not all the time yet, because they're still growing their dossier of companies, but pretty cool. And then inside the movement, there was what I would call system changers. So there we're looking at individual companies with the Whole Foods and the Body Works and the Ben and Jerry's and even the Done Good and Me2We. But then there's these larger organizations. So the fair trade is a movement. It's a really incredible movement. Actually, this week, Thursday, I'm heading to Chicago for the National Fair Trade Conference. And it's pretty cool. A guy by the name of Paul Rice, who's largely credited with starting the concept and the movement of fair trade, will be there speaking amongst many others. And you can see there's Fair Trade USA, which is the one he's involved with. That's the Fair Trade black icon up on the top left of your screen. There's the Fair Trade Federation and Fair for Life. These are all organizations that certify companies and products as being fair trade. And you can see below what some of those definitions are, but these are about making sure that every worker has at least a wage and a half, so living wage, and also that they have control over their products, so that they have control over their land, so that they don't overproduce when they think they're overproducing. That they have benefits in addition to their wages, which, as we all know, so many people around the world don't, that the working conditions are monitored, and that one of the principles of fair trade is you also have to take care of the planet. So if you see a product that's fair trade certified, it's also has very high standards of sustainability. And you can see that even though we still have a long way to go in the market of conscious consumption, you can see on the upper right hand that it's having a large effect. And in fact, those stats are just from the Fair Trade USA, from fairtradecertified.org, which is that black icon on the left, and Fair for Life and Fair Trade Federation and other fair trade organizations also can report some pretty impressive results. Another system changer, again, growing up, the idea of, I remember going to a grocery store. Where was I? I was teaching at one of the state universities in Boston. So it's about 18 years ago. And I remember going to a grocery store with my reusable canvas bag and literally having people yell at me Why would you do that? You're just holding up the line. This will never take. People are never going to go away from plastic bags. It's just the way it is. And unfortunately, as we all know, there's still way too much of that. But look where the movement is. There's towns that have outlawed plastic bags. There's all these certifications, and you can go to any grocery store in the United States and find organic or Rainforest Alliance food products. And so if you're a conscious consumer and you have a little extra money, because these still do cost more right now, you're able to shop more consciously. And the more of us that do that, again, the more the prices keep coming down. It's so much cheaper to do this now than even 5 years ago and 10 years ago. And a movement is bristling. So it's really important for us to remember, when we don't think that change can be made on business level, that we as consumers and that the next generation of civic business leaders, we actually can make significant change and system change. Another big one that's popped up is the BCorp certification. So you can see it's a growing movement. It's actually the hardest certification to get out there. If you're a B Corp, you are absolutely fully transparent. They look at they look in every crack and corner of your organization and your finances and whatnot. And if you get B Corp certification, for those of us who care and are conscious consumers, any of these companies, these 2,778 companies as of this morning, any of those companies are companies we can feel good. They're social enterprises. They're not only doing good for the world, but they're making sure that they're doing no harm for the world in the process. So, how do you get there? How do you get to be a social enterprise? And it's actually quite simple. I love the David Bornstein quote. He was one of the first authors to jump on the movement. He wrote a book called How to Save the World that I'll show you on another screen in a minute. But he said, an idea is like a play. It needs a good producer and a good promoter, even if it's a masterpiece. Otherwise, the play may never open. Or it may open, but for a lack of an audience, close after a week. Similarly, an idea will not move from the fringes to the mainstream simply because it's good. It must be skillfully crafted and marketed before it will actually shift people's perceptions and behavior. And in short, all that's saying is we in the social good, we who are sociologists, we tend to be really good at identifying problems and saying, here's what's needed. I think we're excellent at that, actually. But then we as applied sociologists, we as clinical sociologists, and others who may be on the call, it actually takes more than thinking good and wishing good. It actually takes strategic planning and a great knowledge of business, because the ideas of business aren't as that one business school I mentioned earlier, whose name I'm not mentioning. It's not that business has the answers to the world's social problems, but those of us who are looking for the answers to the world's social problems really need to understand business so that we can grow our ideas in a way that's effective, that's scalable, and ultimately has the largest effect. And the way to do that is through creating a strategic plan or a business plan. I suggest 1, 3, and 5 year. I do a lot of consulting on this, with really the 3 year being your big piece of your plan, and the 4 and 5 being kind of your parking lot, where these are ideas you hope to get within your first 3 years, but if not, you want to remember them. They're kind of your idealistic ideas, and then that first year being this real building year, so that in years 2 and 3 you can really hit all of your goals. And you need to be realistic. In order to build a business, what do you need? You need capital. Who do you get that from? Do you get that from impact investors? Do you get that from foundations and philanthropists? Do you get that by charging more on your product, knowing that conscious consumers are willing to pay it? You just have to be realistic and think about it. And you should use SMART goals, like any good business plan would. Some version of SMART goals. There's lots of versions of it, but we have to be smart if we want to change the world. It's not just about wishing it, having idealistic views about it, analyzing it, being able to be critical about what is. It's actually also about being able to create what we think should be. And that takes business thinking. Business for the social good, but business thinking. I borrowed this from, you can see at the bottom, from Enterprising Nonprofits, a toolkit, which you can get pieces of that online as well. Not the whole book, but pieces of it. But this is why business planning is important. A social entrepreneur has to be able to do this. So attract investment, identify risks. Risk management is huge in risk assessment. Measure social or environmental outcomes. Demonstrate that you're using a business approach. Showcasing the management team. Building alliances. Check thinking. Determine feasibility. These are not necessarily bullet points that we as sociologists or academics often think about, but we're leaving our students short, and we're leaving the movements for social change short if after we've done our structural analysis. So I just want to be clear on this. First, we need to do our structural analysis, understand the social problem, research the heck out of it, ensure that it exists, ensure that we have an understanding of the dynamics that make it exist, talk to the people affected, participatory research, and ensure that we understand from their perspective what's going on, and then partner with them in creating a business plan that helps to overcome that. So a business plan must clearly articulate the mission of the social enterprise, the specific actions needed to achieve goals and objectives, targets for planning, measuring, and improving performance, and of course, resources, costs, and revenues for your program. I'm winding down here. Just wanted to point out a few resources. These are actually stolen from my course syllabus. I teach a course on social entrepreneurship in the sociology department here at Bentley. It's been a great course. The students are amazing in it. And inside this course, about halfway through the semester, I take them through all the, so for the first half is identifying the world's social problems, helping them to identify in as best of an educated way as I can help them get to the holes that they're interested in plugging in the world, the people and planet pieces. And then the second half of the semester, because we happen to be at a business school, it's a little bit easier, is helping them to figure out, okay, you've identified this hole. What are your ideas? What are your entrepreneurial ideas to fill it? And then they create a strategic business plan in order to show how they would create a social enterprise if they wanted to. And there's been so many incredible ideas that have come out of this course just a few times I've taught it, whether it's tackling, because I never know what they're going to be interested in, but tackling the fact that there aren't great grocery stores with a lot of fresh food in urban areas. Or whether I had one group of students, I loved their idea. They created a t-shirt line called We're Aware, W-E-A-R, We're Aware. And it could be cause specific. So on the front, it would have this We're Aware label for branding. And then on the back, whatever your cause is, whatever your organization is, could create, and it could be on the back. And the t-shirts themselves, of course, would be, organic, sustainable, bamboo, fair trade, whatever they needed to be in order for it itself to be a social enterprise. Really cool idea. And I actually see those students moving forward with it. I had another group of students who were really interested, again, probably because it's a business school, in the fact of, in this idea of financial literacy, and that too many people don't have access to even knowing how to open up properly a bank account or move their money around in a way that it can grow better or lose less, to the point of not taking up credit cards with high percentage rates and all of these other pieces. And so they're passionate about bringing that to people who wouldn't otherwise. And they created an online presence for that. And then, which is just this incredible online tool. It's called LearnLux, Learnlux. And then on the back end, they've been getting some corporate sponsors who don't interfere at all with the curriculum and don't interfere with the visuals of the website. So there's not constant pop-ups. It's just an underwritten type of approach. And so they're now, for every person who comes through and is looking at the financial literacy, because they're going to see the names of these companies that are behind it. My students, the social entrepreneurs who started LearnLux, they're actually making their salaries off of this company and looking to move it forward. The School Foundation and the Soka Foundation would be the two starting places if you want to learn more about social entrepreneurship, funding social entrepreneurship, resources around it, what else to read, who else to meet, the stories of great social entrepreneurs. There's so many others, but I wanted to give you those as a guiding and starting point for those who are new in the movement. They're really incredible organizations that are at the heart of helping social entrepreneurs move forward. And from there, I will turn it over to Gary, because I can't really see the screen. I'm so sorry, Gary, and maybe he has some questions.
That's okay, yeah. Any questions from anybody in the audience? If you see at the bottom, if you dragged your mouse over to the bottom, if you don't have it already in a enlarged screen, you should be able to see the chat box. If anybody has any questions for Dr. White about any of the content, feel free to post it up right there. And a quick question I have, Jonathan, while people might be typing in, is there any point at which a company can profit too much before it starts to perhaps lose its status in people's eyes as a social entrepreneurship organization?
I mean, it's a great question. Different people have different ideas about that. In the social entrepreneurship movement, no. There are social enterprises that put a cap, though, on what's reasonable profit. It's not usually a total number, so it's not net profit, but it's more as we grow to such and such, what percentage of profit is reasonable for us to take. And so what they're doing is figuring out how to share more and more of their profits as they gain more and more. As a legitimate question to be posed to the community, though, is should social enterprises be kept at a certain size before, I think what you're hinting at, which I think all of us have a discomfort level with, is there a point at which it's going to have drift away from its values?
Yeah, it's a little bit, for sure. It's definitely one of the questions. And another quick question, and if anybody has any questions, feel free to go ahead and type it in to the chat box. Is there any special tax designation for organizations that have identified themselves as social entrepreneurship enterprises?
That's a great question. Not right now. You don't get any tax benefit from being organic certified, FSC certified, fair trade certified, or any of those designations that we looked at. That would be, wouldn't that be awesome to see in the Green New Deals and whatnot that we're seeing? Like, having companies be rewarded for being social enterprise or for having some of those certifications that help us to ensure that they are good companies. You should.
Well, since we both work at an accounting school, maybe it's something our accounting colleagues could take a look at as well, as what would that policy look like for a social entrepreneurship tax designation for a company?
I mean, that's such a great idea, and actually for all of our colleagues who are faculty on the call, where is it that we help to drive our students, because they're the ones who are going to be the brokers of this movement. Or we looked at business ethics and corporate social responsibility and community giving departments, and now we're looking at social entrepreneurship. But what's next? And how are we preparing our students to figure out the next thing that's even better and even more integrative in social change and structural change than this? So yeah, for us, we have a lot of accounting students, so that makes sense. How about you at your school? What makes sense? What ways can we, through our ability as educators, how can we motivate our students and provide, not just motivate them, provide them with the tools that they need, both to analyze critically the structures of society and to do something to move those?
Great point. Any questions from anybody in the audience? All right, well, we're coming up to the end of the hour, so I just want to thank Dr. White for all the insights he shared around creating social entrepreneurship opportunities and examples from existing companies and directions for creating your own social entrepreneurship organization. I want to thank everyone who signed up for and attended and streamed the webinar, and please make sure you check out our other webinars at the Applied U YouTube site for the Association for Applied and Clinical Sociology. Also, go to the AACS website at aacsnet.net for information regarding our upcoming annual meeting, which is going to be in October in Portland, Oregon. And keep in mind, our next webinar will happen probably towards the end of March. We try to keep these about on a monthly basis, and that will be with Dr. Bob Moore from IBM. And he'll be talking about his work and his new book on using conversation analysis and applying conversation analysis to create better voice agents like Alexa and other kinds of voice agents that people are using in all kinds of areas, not just in your home, but also in healthcare and in concierge services at hotels and in other areas as well. So thanks everyone so much for attending. And if you have any suggestions for future webinars, you can feel free to email me, Gary David at gdavid@bentley.edu, and happy to consider other ideas for future webinars. Thanks so much and take care.